When you think of some of the biggest stars in the UFC and MMA, you know, the likes of Chuck Liddell, Alex Pereira, Israel Adesanya, Mirko Krokop, what's one thing all those guys have in common? Kickboxing. But for one guy in particular, the power Alex Poatan Pereira possesses has become undeniable, and so has his domination of the sport.
Poatan, man. Alex Pereira. That fucking power's nuts.
He's headlined at some of the biggest shows in recent years, and he's transformed into an absolute superstar, which is even more surprising when you remember how kickboxing used to be viewed in the US.
You know, Dana White and I had a conversation about this when he was talking about how kickboxing has a negative stigma in America because of PKA karate, boring kickboxing that they used to have on ESPN. They would wear those big stupid slippers on their feet. They wouldn't really kick. It wasn't exciting.
But Pereira wasn't the first kickboxing star to take over the MMA world. Before the UFC had even started, before anyone had been able to show high-level striking in MMA, one man brought the entire sport to a whole new level.
I saw you fight back before there was any real good striking in mixed martial arts. You gotta watch this motherfucker, Bas Rutten. Like this, it's finally a guy who's over there that knows how to strike.
The factory that cleans everything in your body is the liver, and if you give it a big bang, you know, yeah.
They just couldn't believe how much pain they were in. You were one of the first guys that you know, that hard Dutch style of kickboxing to enter into mixed martial arts.
But this was also the early 90s, and kickboxers should have been a fish out of water against the grappling juggernauts that were strangling everyone in sight. How did he overcome this? And more importantly, how did he become legitimately one of the greatest MMA fighters ever? Well, I'm Balian from MMA On Point. Shout out to all the Hall of Famers out there, guys. We really appreciate your support. And this is the story of Bas Rutten, MMA's first kickboxing superstar. Chapter 1: Humble Beginnings. Up until the 1970s, you wouldn't really have associated the country of Holland with kickboxing at all. But then a few of the full contact karate guys like Jan Plas traveled to Japan to learn about this new sport that combined boxing and karate, and they came back to Holland to start a kickboxing legacy that's still producing world champions. But for Bas Rutten, at first, any kind of athletics, let alone fighting, seemed just impossible.
So I was severe asthma patient. Every 5 weeks I had an attack, weak in bed, not even able to eat. And I together with that with an eczema, like, which was horrible because I looked like a leper. It was really bad.
He got teased and relentlessly bullied about this, and his only respite was run into the woods behind his family home where he'd climb trees and swing about, pretending to be Spider-Man. He'd go out there, act out his comic book fantasies, hoping one day to transform himself. He was from a family of athletes though, and by 12 years old, he was getting better and got involved in athletics, loving the high jump, the long jump, the javelin, but then he took a family trip to France in 1976 and had his martial arts revelation. After dreaming of comic book superheroes, he came face to face with a real-life one, a man who blew the brains of generations of future martial artists, the legend Bruce Lee. Only problem was, Bas was too young to get in to see Enter the Dragon, so he snuck in and had his little martial arts mind exposed to the violence and technique of Bruce. The young Rutten realized, if I could be like Bruce, I wouldn't have to worry about bullies anymore. Apparently, the first thing he did when he got home was make nunchucks out of 2 pieces of wood and begged his parents to let him start Taekwondo. But after about 4 weeks of training, Bas stood up to one of his bullies and punched him square in the face. And the kid went to hospital, and his parents were like, no more of that. Not while you're under our roof. Now, Bas found ways to keep his training going at school with his friends, but it all properly started after he left home and was able to take up and start studying karate, continue training in Taekwondo, but eventually joined a Dutch Thai boxing gym, where his eyes were immediately open to the realities of a truly effective martial art.
I went from karate, full contact karate, I went to Thai boxing. And the first Thai boxing class, my hands are here. This guy hits my face, I bring my hands up. Well, he saw that right away, and he introduced me to the liver shot, and I'm down.
Bas went home and practiced that same technique for hours in front of the mirror.
And my wife at the time, my girlfriend at the time, said, "You're completely crazy." I said, "No, that will never happen again." And the next day I went back and I cleaned 85% of the gym out.
After joining the gym, things started started to move pretty quickly for Bas, and he started to take over the Dutch kickboxing scene.
I was fighting Thai boxing in Holland. I won a lot of fights by knockout. Like my first 14 fights I won by knockout too.
My very first 6 fights, it's chaos. Dude, I was just strong and powerful, but I was just smashing people.
The sport was big in Holland at the time, and Bas got to share the card with some other legends like Ramon Dekkers, an absolute Muay Thai monster who turned out to be a big influence on Bas's striking style.
I mean, I fought on the same card as he fought one time, all the way in the beginning. I mean, he was so skinny, the amount of torque that he had on his kicks, and I started analyzing everything. And I saw Mike Tyson. I go, wait a minute, what are these two having in common? And he and Mike Tyson, what they do is they use their upper body rotation. So I started changing my whole style and getting very open.
Bas was turning into a fan favorite knockout artist, but he was still working as a bouncer and getting drunk every night. He was working as a model. He was even working in a kitchen.
I was a chef. I went 4 years to culinary school.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and then I became a fighter.
He had a fantastic start to his kickboxing career, 14 knockouts, but he didn't leave the sport on the best of terms. While out and particularly drunk on New Year's, Bas unknowingly accepted a fight with one of the scariest men in Holland.
I fought this guy, Frank Lopman, apparently on New Year's Day when I was bouncing and was also drunk. Well, they asked me where to send the posters to, and I said, what posters? From the fights. I said, who's gonna fight? You against Lopman. And I go, who said that? He said, you. I was so out of shape, it was not even funny.
Lopman was just a few days out of prison and was literally looking for a fight, but even worse, just a few days out, Bas completely shredded his shin bone.
I could jump this high, like my chest here. I would stand in front of it and jump on a wall. But it had been raining and I jumped on it, my toes slid up and I landed on my shin on it. So they ripped my shin open. We'll numb up the whole leg. You know, don't worry about it, he says, and he said he put it in my butt.
I'm not a doctor, but numbing your entire left leg before a kickboxing fight does not seem like a good idea.
The whole time I'm shaking my leg and I can't feel my leg. It's like the weirdest thing, you know? I'm landing on my butt and I want to get up and I can't get up. My leg doesn't work. Then all the people start saying, see, I always said that he cannot fight. I said, okay, I'll fight another fight. And I shouldn't have taken that fight.
And for Bas, he's admitted that was a bit of a wake-up call about getting blackout drunk and accepting fights, and also fighting while injured, something he didn't do in his next kickboxing fight against another Dutch guy, René Roos. Now, at the time, there were a lot of Dutch fighters who had, let's say, bad reputations as dirty fighters. I mean, you can just watch this one fight, René versus Heath Herring, and see what I mean. Yeah, it was pretty bad. But this guy was Bas's next fight, and yeah, it didn't go well. Unfortunately, this fight doesn't appear to exist online anywhere, but the long and the short of it is, René apparently tried to bite Bas, and he returned the favour by kneeing him in the groin as hard as he could. The fight was called off. It didn't make fans feel any better about Bas's last performance, and apparently the entire arena broke out into a massive brawl. If anyone knows what this fight is, please let me know. I'd love to see it.
Please, Bill. I don't know what's going on, mate. I swear to you, please, Bill. Please, Bill, my life.
Rutten would only have one more kickboxing fight in Holland before he completely disassociated himself from the sport. It also didn't go well. In the lead up, Rutten got an ear infection, then got into a street fight after arriving in Paris and was put into a jail cell up to 2 days out from the fight, and then the outcome of the fight itself was just a disaster.
He's standing in front of me and I'm so tired, you know, my body is like, I'm so tired, and I go, boom, give him a back fist in his neck and he goes down. Like a month before, there was a rule that if you did a back fist, you only could do it with the turns. I couldn't come out for the second round because I was too tired, and they said, okay. Now it really started in Holland. You see, I always said he was not so good, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, I never fight for Holland anymore. If these fans are like this, I don't want to fight in front of people like this.
So kickboxing is now off the table for Bas Rutten. It is also worth saying at this point, something else fans love about Bas is his fun personality. He's great at comedy, and even at this point in his life, he kind of knew that he wanted to do something with that. So he started a martial arts live show with a twist.
So a buddy of mine, both together we made this show. It's like a martial arts show on music, and we started doing this in like nightclubs. I would kick him in the belly like Bruce Lee and Enter the Dragon, right? He would grab my foot, throw me back, and I would make a flying kick in his face and land. And we had bows, and we did nunchucks, and we did like break tests, the crazy stuff, and we started putting comedy in there also.
Mijn wapen.
That caught on real fast. People really started to seem to like that. First in nightclubs, then we started doing it on shows like events, big events. And then we were on Dutch TV, and then Eurosport saw it, and they had an event yearly in France.
But just when it seemed like Bas might actually not have to fight people to make a living anymore, he got an invitation that would reel him back into the combat sports scene.
Chris Dolman was sitting there, tough guy, you know. He called me to him and he says, "Man, you got some really good abilities, man. Did you ever think about free fighting? You know what it is?" He says, "No." He said, "Well, we do that in Japan."
Now, free fighting, no holds barred, whatever it was being called, mixed martial arts, none of those names really even existed at this point. Remember, this was before the UFC had even started. Pro wrestling had developed to a point in Japan that the wrestlers were kind of obsessed with pushing the realism and would just lay into each other. It's a very strange time in combat sports history, and also very confusing. Some things are real and some things just aren't, but they mostly aren't. Chris Dolman was in Rings, a promotion that had these kind of matches. In 1992 and 1993, it was deep into this culture of sort of having real fights, but it also being completely predetermined. Even still, there were legitimate techniques that Bas could learn from. So Chris invites Bas to come to his gym and join a free fighting session.
So I walk in there, and at that moment I was, European champion Thai boxing. I walk in and they killed me.
Did you know that they were going to grapple when you went there?
No, nothing. I literally, when I drove back, I had to stop my car next to the road, and I called my wife. I said, "Listen, I have my car next to the road here. I'm going to sleep." I said, "I can't drive." It broke me. I had to drink liquid food for like 3 days because my whole throat was messed up, because I thought I could hold that. I'm going to go back 3-6 months. I'm going to tap everybody there.
But unfortunately for Bas, that's not really what happened. And I get it. Bas was still working as a bouncer, doing all these other side hustles. It was hard to find time to train, and the idea just kind of faded away. But out of the blue, we got another phone call from Chris a few months later that would change his life.
I pick up the phone for some reason, and it's Chris Dolman. He says, "Bas, you got to come tonight. You got to come to Amsterdam. There's a tryout for a new organization, Pancrase." I started sparring with this guy. This guy was a rings champion. He tried to hurt me because they were filming. Result was me knocking him out with a high kick, boom, and his whole eyebrow was open. He had to go to the hospital for stitches.
It turns out the two guys who were coming to watch were Funaki and Suzuki, both legends of Japanese pro wrestling and co-founders of Pancrase.
Suzuki and Funaki, I saw them pointing at me, so they wanted me.
Chapter 2, The King of Pancrase. The world of combat sports in Japan worked very differently from what was going on in Holland. Like I said, it had come from the pro wrestling days, where everything is as much a spectacle as possible, so simple concepts like weight classes were just not even part of the thought process for something like Pancrase.
So this tall guy walks in. "How are you doing?" I said, "Nice." So you're the promoter. He goes, No, I'm fighting you." I go, "Fighting me?" I said, "What's your weight?" He was like 33 pounds heavier, right? Promoter walked in. "You're the promoter?" "Yeah." I go, is he not too heavy?" He goes, No. Everybody fights everybody. There's no weight class. I go, "Okay, great." So I'm acting, right?
Remember, Bas was used to the world of Thai boxing, where 6 pounds was a different weight class.
I thought it was weird there was no weigh-ins. Wait a minute, did we talk about a weight? So I'm
But the surprises kept on coming.
"How many rounds were we fighting?" He goes, One. Yeah. "How many minutes?" He goes, 30. What the heck? 30 freaking minutes. These rules were tailor-made for the Japanese guys because they were really good submission guys.
That's why I put those R's on my hand, right, to stay relaxed, because I'm such a hothead.
To make things worse, Bas was also going up against a number 4 ranked guy in Japan. Despite all of that though, Bas Rutten's first MMA fight was an absolutely flawless performance.
Right high kick, and that's the palm strike. That's gotta hurt. He goes down. I was so excited. I jumped up to all 4 corners. I was kind of concerned here. He didn't move at all. It took a long time. He will stand up and then he will fall down again, and then he stood up again. Yeah, it was scary. I didn't want to leave Japan until I knew that he was okay.
It was an execution of devastating striking, the like of which nobody had seen before in Japan, and he was actually worried he might have seriously hurt the guy.
Because he spent 2 days in the hospital. He was gone for 2 days. Literally 3-4 minutes on the ground, like completely no movement. He's on the ground with the eyes open, there's no movement. And I'm freaking out now, you know it. I don't want that. This guy was really nice to me.
I bet the Japanese audience probably didn't know what to expect when the untrained Dutchman joined their hybrid wrestling promotion, but the Bas had arrived.
So what Bas figured out how to do was pull his hand way back, so he was punching with his palm.
A lot of people slap him like this. Oh, my skin hurts. You want to hit him KO. You do that with this bone. Hit somebody like this. Hit somebody like that. Don't do this.
Apparently though, on the day of his second Pancrase fight, they woke him up super early, made him travel all day, arriving at the venue 5 hours before the fight. I mean, honestly, not the first time we've heard of foreign fighters getting this treatment abroad. Rampage talked about this when he went over to Japan to fight Sakuraba. Apparently though, because of the time difference and the flight, Bas had only slept 1 hour, and so fight time came and he was feeling pretty sick as well.
And here I went for a guillotine, but I really didn't know anything on the ground here. I was sick.
Bas was able to survive some of these early submission attempts because in Pancrase you were allowed to use the ropes to escape a submission. Because let's face it, the guy had zero training at this point. And with Bas being so sick and tired, he wasted no time going straight for the finish. Fuke was one of the best fighters in Japan and couldn't believe they'd lost to Bas, especially from a body shot.
And here you will see Yusuke Fuke asking for a rematch.
Rutten had already destroyed 2 of the top guys in just 2 fights using his devastating striking, which was honestly like nothing the sport had ever seen. Something that had been happening a lot in Japan at that time though was fight fixing, making matchups with predetermined outcomes.
Did you ever see Bart Vale versus Ken Shamrock? It looks so fake. It's one of the early ones that looks really like a work.
Bas had heard about this and expected, he might be asked to do the same.
And before I went, I got that speech from Chris Dolman. He said they're probably going to ask you, to lose or to win a fight. I said, Chris, I don't want to do that.
After his second Pancrase fight, Bas was taken out to dinner by the promoters.
By the way, we had dinner with Funaki Suzuki and Adagaga. Here we go. They gave me a book from Fujiwara, a really good wrestler. I thought you guys were going to ask me something. He said, what do you mean? He says, well, Chris Dolman told me that you're probably going to ask to throw the fight. And Suzuki told me straight in my face, I will never ask you such a thing.
So apparently he never did. But what he did get next was the #1 guy in the whole of Japan, Masakatsu Funaki.
1-2 fights, the first 2 fights in Pancrase, and one guy in Holland says, he says, Bas, everybody was saying, oh, he's going to lose, he's going to lose, he's going to lose. And one guy says, Bas, whatever happens, they never take this away from you anymore.
Bas was still not getting any proper training in for these fights, mind you.
The first 9 months, I did 2 times a day, 12 rounds on the back, and then I would spar with my kickboxing students.
And during this time in Japan, he bumped into Ken Shamrock, who told him about this tournament in America with no rules called the UFC. Rutten said it sounded like a 70s post-apocalyptic movie, a dangerous and stupid idea. He was ready to have a great career and a great time in Japan, so he didn't even think about joining the UFC. He was far too focused on fighting the #1 guy, Funaki.
Now, by now, everybody knew that I was a striker. Ooh, oh, knee to the head. That's the perfect example of me showing that I didn't know anything.
Just 2 minutes in though, and Bas lands a punch, not a palm strike from the bottom, and he apologized, and Funaki took advantage.
I hit him with a closed fist, which was not allowed in Pancrase, and he went right away into the toe hold. That was a very painful experience.
Even though he'd managed to beat some of the best guys in Japan, clearly Bas had a lot of things to work on. And in fact, he'd end up winning his next 2 fights by submission. Vernon Tiger White tried to take him down and ran into a guillotine, but against Takahashi after that, Bas basically snapped the guy's leg in half. They again matched up Bas with the #1 guy in Japan, Minoru Suzuki, who'd never lost in Pancrase and had also managed to submit Ken Shamrock, and he'd only ever lost to Hoist Gracie at this point.
I'm walking on the street, right? And we suddenly be here with all the fighters. We hear hybrid wrestling, Pancrase, and we look and there's this giant screen, and the first thing you see is me, baff, giving a palm strike, and the guy goes down, and we go, yay! you know, and it's the promo for the next day.
Again, Bas is about to fight the best in Japan, and he still really hasn't had any formal training at this point.
This is at the time I had nobody to roll with, right? I trained on the back. If there was somebody who knew judo, he would come. I mean, I'm talking about once every 3 weeks.
But Japan had started to change his approach to fighting.
I was a super aggressive fighter in Thai boxing, and in Japan, it completely changed me. I was thinking during the fight, and I've never been like that. And I thought, wow, I just became a complete different fighter, way more calculated than I was in Thai boxing.
But could that fighter beat the undefeated Suzuki? Well, Suzuki came out and he looked like an absolute killer. But despite all the bravado, Bas scored first.
Bang! Down. And this was the moment that my wife left. Beautiful double leg takedown from Suzuki.
I love the moment in this fight you can hear his coach asking him to follow the R's on his hands. And then in one athletic flash, it was all over with another sickening liver shot.
Look at the people in the audience, they can't believe it. It's over. I beat the unbeatable Minoru Suzuki.
To the fans watching, it was an incredible performance. Suzuki was considered basically invincible and an amazing catch wrestler, but despite his striking background, Bas had shut him down. Rutten, though, was about to find out in his next fight that unless he stepped up his training, he was never going to get past the world's most dangerous man, the guy called Ken Shamrock. Both Bas and Ken were masters in completely different disciplines.
Nice right palm straight from Bas. Oh, and a nice exchange again. Oh, a little bit aggressive. Oh, hey!
But striker versus grappler, especially in the 90s, we knew how that one often played out. And the odds were about to catch up with Bas.
And I didn't know anything. He's got a heel hook. Up, and there's a escape. A little bit later. Ooh, that was a good heel hook. 2 lost points. This is not good.
Ken still, though, had to work seriously hard to get Bas out of there as he kept finding his ways to the rope to escape.
I'm escaping again. Ken thought he won the fight, and I tapped.
But for Rutten at the time, he was just years behind Ken on the ground.
This is so painful to watch, ladies and gentlemen, if you could only believe what I feel right now. And now I make a stupid mistake, and now he's got a clean choke on me, and that's over.
Now it was clear even to Bas at this point he needed to start learning submissions, and for his next fight against Jason De Lucia, he again got another guillotine choke. Pancrase then announced the start of the first King of Pancrase tournament, and in the opening round, Rutten had drew Frank Shamrock, Ken Shamrock's brother, and he had a second chance to test his new ground game.
It's a beautiful takedown there, and go for a choke. I roll him over.
This was Frank's Pancrase debut, and the fight turned into an absolute classic. It was so close with both guys constantly reversing each other and landing shots.
Armbar now. Oh, he rolls out. Come on, kick to the head. Oh, that was a beautiful kick.
But neither guy could finish the other, and it went to the judges.
Judges went for Frank Shamrock. I thought they should have gone for me.
It was another setback for Bas, and he was out of the running for the King of Pancrase tournament before it even started. And it was actually Ken who picked up 3 submissions on the way to the final, where he fought Manabu Yamada for 30 minutes and was crowned the first King of Pancrase. The promoters still believed that Bas was one of the best, and so they gave him the guy who fought Ken in the championship final, Yamada. And Rutten put on an incredible performance.
This man stood 30 minutes against Ken Shamrock and couldn't submit him.
Ken had gone 30 minutes, and in just under 1, Bas had him.
I gave it everything I had. I kept squeezing. This was kind of scary because I really thought I killed him there.
You could only imagine the impression that this gave the fans. There was only one fight to make, the rematch between Ken and Bas, and all Rutten did was train specifically not to get knee barred.
I was training 3 weeks with a person, and I said, listen, I want you to tell me how to stop me from getting into a knee bar.
But of course, it was gonna happen, right? This guy had taught Bas that there was only one thing he needed to worry about, the left leg. But that wasn't true, and Ken completely surprised him. The loss in this rematch to Ken changed Bas forever. He never wanted to let that happen again. His kickboxing had always been his best weapon, but now he was going to have to get real elbows deep and dirty in the sweaty world of grappling.
Ken's fight against me made me who I am.
After my third loss, that's when I got really mad at myself because it was a loss by submission again. I said, I need to find one guy, and I found one guy, Leon Van Dijk. He was 19 years old at the time.
But instead of seeking out a high-level grappling coach, Bas just grabbed one of his buddies and they would roll and then literally write down on paper how they escaped.
Both we didn't know anything, and we would watch tapes. I would see a heel hook, for instance. I would write down how it works. Now let's break this down. Let's see how we can make it better. Say, okay, how can you escape? Well, if I push this way, okay, so how can I stop you from doing this?
I mean, that's just crazy. Even at this point in his career, Bas found the best way to train was with his buddy.
But, you know, every day I was looking forward to train, especially when I added the ground game. And I would see a submission. Oh, shit, I'm going to try it out. I would submit my wife in the middle of the night. We'll wake her up.
So you basically did it by yourself from scratch.
Everything.
No high-level instruction at all.
Nothing.
Absolutely insane idea, but one that would actually work extremely well. Bas started to arrive early in Japan for his fights. He even started training at the Pancrase dojo, where he kept his eyes open and wrote down everything he saw to practice at home with Leon. And it immediately began to pay off.
Now I'm getting good on the ground. Now I'm training 2 times a day, ground fighting. Liver kick, hook, and now heel hook on his right leg. And that's it.
In his next 2 fights, Bas tapped Maurice Smith and then Jason DeLucia again, both with leg attacks, and both in just about 2 minutes. And then Rutten would have the chance to really test his newfound skills in a rematch against Frank Shamrock.
I get the knee bar, the referee breaks us up. Fights like this made me into the fighter that I'm now. And here I got a stretched knee bar.
Yeah, I got a knee bar.
You see, this is the second time I have a full knee bar on him and the referee breaks us up.
Once again, neither guy could finish each other, but this time Bas got the decision. That was 4 wins in a row, and he was once again going to get a shot at the Pancrase Openweight Championship. It meant another rematch, this time against Minoru Suzuki, the guy who'd been undefeated when Bas beat him the first time. But Suzuki had just beaten Ken Shamrock and claimed the title. Despite all the training though, Bas was still taken down by Suzuki multiple times. But jaws started dropping cage side as Bas started to get the better of the grappling.
I roll into a knee bar there. Hey!
Suzuki threw up a knee bar, which is the last submission Bas Rutten ever gets caught in. Minoru couldn't believe it, and then Rutten saw his chance and took it. After 16 Japanese free fights getting ragdolled and submitted by grappling masters, Bas Rutten was finally a world champion, and he was not going to let go of that belt easily. He settled into his role at the top of the promotion, and over the next 7 months, beat another 4 fighters.
At the time, a good contract I had for $40,000 a fight. You have to understand, at the time, $60,000 was 3 fights in the UFC. I wanted $10,000 a month. If I in January get an injury and I can't fight a whole year, you're going to have to pay me $10,000 a month for the rest of the year.
Bas had broken his hand though, and so he'd have to wait to defend his belt. Frank Shamrock, since losing to Rutten, had won 6 fights in a row, including the interim Pancrase Openweight Championship, where he managed to knee bar Suzuki after 22 minutes. Once Bas had recovered, the unification title fight was made, and both Frank and Bas had 1 win over each other. This fight was fucking awesome, and is in hindsight 2 of the greatest in their era going at each other. It was again super even, but Bas still had his power, his one equalizer. I mean, this thing was just getting fun. They were putting each other in submissions, and Bas was just smacking Frank in the face. It was incredible. But those smacks opened up a cut on Frank that just seemed to drain the fight out of it. After he fell down, he could barely get up. He was clearly concerned about the cut, and so were the Japanese officials, and just like that, they called the fight, and Bas was still the champ. But now he was going to have to face the only Japanese legend he had yet to beat. The man he first lost to, one of the founders of the promotion who'd flown to Amsterdam and hired him in the first place. Masakatsu Funaki. This guy was on a 6-fight submission streak, and just a year before, in 1 minute, he submitted Bas's training partner, Leon. Immediately, Rutten's sub-defense was being tested by the Japanese catch wrestling legend.
He's going to reverse my foot upside down. Watch. It's turned 180 degrees. He's going for a knee bar. Okay, but I saw that coming.
It's a classical technical Pancrase fight, but the king would not be denied.
With this one, I broke his nose.
And then this fight turned into a massacre.
I said, okay, now I gotta finish you.
It was a beautiful performance from Bas Rutten. The only loss Bas hadn't avenged at this point was those 2 to Ken Shamrock, and he'd long left Japan and was now fighting for super championship fights in the UFC. But it is easy to forget that this Dutch kickboxer, who not even the founders of Pancrase, Funaki and Suzuki could submit, was a guy who learned grappling basically by himself watching videos. Unfortunately for Bas, at this point his pregnant wife became ill, there was a chance of losing the baby, so he didn't go and defend his Pancrase title. And that's when Pancrase asked him to resign, and he did. After giving up his title, Bas continued to fight in Pancrase, extending his winning streak to 18 fights, undefeated. All the promises he'd ever made about never being submitted again, and after losing to Ken the second time, they'd all come true. His time with Pancrase was about to come to an end, but all the time he'd spent in Japan was just the beginning. He'd become an international sensation that people in America were starting to take notice of. There was only one place left for Bas to conquer, and he moved his family to the US, ready to join the UFC. Chapter 3, the greatest mixed martial artist of all time.
I wanted to go to the UFC for the entrance song. I kid you not. I thought that was the coolest thing.
The old original.
And that really, they came ask me. I said, but that was the deciding factor that I said, okay, I want to do it.
Bas's UFC start didn't exactly go smoothly. The anticipation from the fan base was massive. You know, Rutten's win streak was legendary, and there was only one person everyone wanted to see him fight: Randy Couture, the UFC heavyweight champion. At UFC Brazil in October 1998, Bas and Randy were supposed to fight, but unfortunately, it fell apart.
Randy Couture has elected not to defend his heavyweight title.
Randy was having his own problems with the UFC, and he ended up vacating the title and switching places with Bas. He went to Japan to compete in Vale Tudo, Japan, and imagine the frustration for the fans, and Rutten had just arrived in the US. Instead, Bas was there cage side doing commentary that night at UFC Brazil.
What is it about the Ultimate Fighting Championship which makes a fighter of your caliber want to own that heavyweight belt?
It's the biggest tournament in the world, the most known tournament in the world. This belt is the most important belt.
The UFC put together a heavyweight tournament to see who would get to fight for the title. It meant that if Bas wanted to become champion, he'd first have to get past Tsuyoshi Kosaka at UFC 18. The hype for Rutten was insane.
How much hype can be behind for the first ever time for Bas Rutten?
Everybody's putting a hype on me.
They promoted the shit out of you when you first came.
Oh, I remember that.
I gave you one of the posters.
Yeah.
Brian sold it on eBay. I used to have the old posters. The world's best martial artist.
Greatest martial artist.
We boast the greatest mixed martial artists in the world. The anticipation and the hype has been so utterly outstanding.
Goldberg said he had photographic reflexes and called it perfectly though. More anticipation than any fighter in Ultimate Fighter history. In the cage though, in a new environment, things didn't go perfect for Bas. He got taken down quickly by Kasaka, something that happened a lot in Pancrase, but he couldn't really get anything going and ate way more ground and pounds now he was in the UFC. And actually, quite controversially, John McCarthy stood them up twice, even with Kasaka in mount. The fight went into overtime, but Bas had another weapon he'd started to master before a lot of other heavyweights: conditioning. He waited until there was 1 minute on the clock left before he absolutely attacked Kasaka. It hadn't been a great start, but the finish was brutal and the crowd went insane. Bas revealed though in the post-fight interview that his career had nearly been over before he'd even got to the UFC.
They fixed me up because I couldn't fight anymore. I went in therapy with them and they fixed me up total free.
On the other end of the bracket, Pedro Hizzo had beaten Mark Coleman, but he and Bas were very good friends and they didn't want to fight.
Pedro Hizzo next for the heavyweight championship of the world.
He's my brother, but I'm going to be the champion. I'm going to do everything in my power.
So instead, Bas would face Kevin Randleman for the UFC heavyweight championship 3 months later. Now, Randleman was a monster wrestler from Mark Coleman's team, Hammerhouse. He'd won in Vale Tudo, Brazil by just slamming guys around the ring.
This 28-year-old was a 3-time Big Ten champion and 2-time U.S. national champion.
And after he'd beat the former champion and another kickboxer, Maurice Smith, at UFC 19, UFC 20 was going to be Randleman versus Rutten. Maurice Smith was the first kickboxer to find success in the UFC. He became the heavyweight champion, but he was never the kind of superstar that Bas was, even on Arrival. And this fight with Kevin was possibly the worst stylistic matchup for Bas Rutten at this point. But he had 14 submissions on his record and he was still miles ahead of guys like Kevin with his kickboxing. But I just want you to put this into perspective right now. What does everyone think of Alex Pereira as this video is going out? That he is the best on the feet, that he's unbeatable, incredible. Well, this is exactly what people thought of Bas as well, that he was the best.
For the UFC Heavyweight Championship of the World, to tell you who the greatest mixed martial artist in the heavyweight division is in our universe.
And you know what the funny thing about all this is that Bas wasn't even really a heavyweight. He had to drink water on the day of the weigh-ins to get himself above 200 pounds so he could fight for the title.
He's not Maurice Smith. Maurice Smith was 220. I'm nervous of Bas Rutten's kicks because he's quick. But at the same time, if I get knocked out, so what?
Kev was so nervous that apparently he said to Bas before the night of the fight, "If you don't kick me, I won't take you down." Well, I can tell you that is exactly not what happened.
It is the most prestigious belt in the world of mixed martial arts.
About 10 seconds in, Bas threw a kick, and about 20 seconds later, he was on his back. With the former champ Mark Coleman calling him on, Randleman split open Bas with an elbow.
I'm sure he would probably do that. He doesn't want
the ref stood them up to check on Bas's cut, and his nose was smashed.
Yo, your nose is broken.
You tell me if you want to continue.
A broken nose, but no bother to Bas Rutten.
The fight continued, and Bas cracked Kevin with one hard body kick. He was taken down, but this is where the fight gets controversial, because from this point, Kevin is completely gassed, but he stays on top and does, well, nothing. Whenever they got stood up, Bas would get taken down again, and the crowd started to just go silent. The fight went into overtime round 1, where again, Rutten was on his back, throwing strikes and going after submissions, and Kevin was unable to muster the energy to do anything. Then it went to overtime round 2, Rutten landed another kick, but the same thing happened. All Bas could do was attack off his back, but he landed 41 strikes in the final 3 minutes. Randleman only had like 13. The final horn blew, and the greatest mixed martial artist in the world just spent the entire fight on his back. The judges were split, but they declared Bas Rutten the new UFC heavyweight champion.
It is my great pleasure to declare you the new UFC heavyweight champion of the world.
Then he broke my nose and I was considering quitting. Then I think, fuck it, man, I'm going to. His last 2 rounds going to be my rounds. Even when he takes me down, I'm going to punch him. He'll not hit me. That's what I just did. I just unloaded.
Among the fans and media, though, this was a controversial decision and still is to this day. But here's the thing, guys, okay, and we were talking about this in the office. We don't really think it is that controversial. There was a point in UFC history where you could win a fight just by laying on top and doing nothing, or a takedown at the end of a round would win it. Thankfully, that's not the case anymore. The rules these days mean you have to do damage. You can't just control or backpack a guy. If Bas vs Kevin had been scored today, I think they would have given it to Rutten. If you look at the numbers, Bas landed almost 4 times the amount of strikes that Kevin did. And guys, this is UFC 20, okay? This is before MMA had adopted boxing's rule system. The scoring criteria is kind of what it's like today, based entirely on damage. Bas ended up going to the hospital, but that was only really from, what, the first 6 minutes of the fight? After that, Kevin didn't really do anything. But I honestly think he deserved to win that fight. The plan for Rutten after that was to stop fighting at heavyweight, finally, and try and become the first fighter to win 2 belts in 2 weight classes, going down to middleweight. But after a long career and a 21-fight win streak, all the fights had finally caught up with him.
What made you stop?
Pain. That neck injury, I brought it all the way to the Randleman fight. I was hurting. I couldn't sleep. I was on sleeping pills for such a long time because of pain. There was always pain in my neck. Tore biceps, like throwing a left hook in the air. Pack. I go, oh my God, what's going on now? You know, I start breaking down.
At this point, the legacy of Bas Rutten was already set in stone, and he started to transition into TV show work, commentating back over in Japan and Pride, and although he kept trying to fight Randy Couture for a while, ultimately it never came together. While in Pride, Bas tried to make a comeback, almost taking a short notice fight against Vanderlei Silva, and when Ken Shamrock came over to Pride as well, Bas wanted to avenge the only loss he hadn't, but Ken just didn't want to fight him after already beating him twice. Rutten, though, would make a return to the sport for a one-off fight in the WFA 7 years after he'd won his UFC title.
They offered me a lot of money. He says, who do you want to fight? Hickson. That was the first I said Hickson.
Right.
They said, we don't have the money for that. It's never going to happen. When they said Kimberly Paul, I said, are you sure? I said, man, I just hang out with him in Japan. When he fought in Japan, it's kind of weird. I said, no, he actually wants to fight you. I said, oh, cool. And then, yeah, he got tested positive. So that was
then Ruben had to take his place.
Ultimately, he fought Ruben Villarreal, and both guys were past their prime, but Bas still conquered with his leg kicks though, and he'd extended the win streak to 22. His work as a commentator in Pride will forever resonate with fans as one of the best to ever do it, and he got to train and influence the careers of other great fighters like Mark Kerr, and we'll probably see that soon in the Smashing Machine movie, where Bas is apparently playing himself. What's more important though, I think, is all the kickboxers who followed in Bas Rutten's footsteps. Mark Hunt, Mirko Krokop, Alistair Overeem all came from the kickboxing world of K1 and fought MMA in Japan, just like Bas had done, before eventually transitioning to the UFC, where each of them became international superstars. None of those guys could win a UFC title though. Really, it was the arrival of Israel Adesanya that restarted this kickboxing boom. Izzy's entire career had been all kickboxing overseas in China before he switched to MMA and became a dominant champion. And of course, he was dethroned by another kickboxer, Alex Pereira, a guy who's now ascended the MMA ladder and pretty much sits at the top. And how did he get there? Using his incredible kickboxing skills and experience. And he's probably the biggest new star in the promotion at the moment. More than anything though, I think it was the passion for martial arts that helped inspire so many future fighters. Bas really cares, really cares about the art of fighting. How about his call during Hello Japan? He just let that guy have it.
Hello Japan!
Oh my God, this is so dumb. Why?
Bas Rutten will go down in history as one of the greatest mixed martial artists in the sport. If you want to write up a list of pioneers, well, here's one guy who brought the dangerous striking of kickboxing into the world of MMA and was able to adapt and learn the ground game to the level that he was beating complete experts. A guy like Bas Rutten is really a once-in-a-lifetime individual. Not only a guy with the skill and ability to become a world champion, but the passion for the sport, the personality of a TV show comedian, and at one point, he really was the UFC's biggest superstar and the greatest mixed martial artist in the world. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you enjoyed that trip down memory lane. For me, Bas Rutten's one of the guys, his highlight reel I saw on YouTube way back in the day got me literally into mixed martial arts. So to be able to revisit his career and kind of pull it apart and shine some light on it for you guys, it means a lot to me as well. So thank you for watching this one. Big shout out to Luke Taylor for this one, guys. Okay, cool to me. He edited this video for you, brought it all together, brought the Pancrase montages into one realm. I want to give a big shout out as well to all of the Hall of Famers who are already members here on the channel. Thank you guys for supporting us and the content and making longer videos like this possible as well. We do have a membership program here at MMA On Point. If you want to join and support the channel a bit more, you can sign up to be a member. You get access to the unedited versions of the podcast we do, as well as the writers' meetings, so go ahead and check them out. If you really like this one, guys, don't forget to give us a like or a thumbs up. Same thing. It means a lot, especially for the videos like this. And of course, if you do want to see more from us, you can hit subscribe. We do lots of videos every single week. But thank you very much, everybody. I've been Balian. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope Bas Rutten enjoyed this video as well. There you go.